The pack considers its future, with several members going to graduate, and a new threat comes to Beacon Hills. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is the Fandom Realm. And today, I'm going to be going over and covering my number 9 most favorite Teen Wolf episode, and that comes from Season 6, Episode 1, Memory Lost. Now, I'm having to re-record this, and I do apologize because this was supposed to already be out, but something happened and the audio was just absolutely terrible. So this may not be out until Saturday, maybe even Sunday, depending on how the re-edit goes. Now, do remember, this is a spoiler review, so just keep that in mind. And this is going to be probably a little different because I'm just going to go through and maybe not follow exactly scene by scene, and things may not be in 100% order, although it's going to be pretty close. So the episode gets started basically in its cold open as we're going to come through the sky through the clouds to Beacon Hills, and we come into the wildlife preserve, or at least I guess that's where they're supposed to be. And we come upon Hayden and Liam, and they are having some car troubles. Apparently they have a flat tire, and they are not going to have anything to fix it. Liam looks for a jack and can't find one. Hayden lifts the back end of the vehicle up, but he can't find a spare tire either. And so with that, they're going to talk. They're sort of going to laugh around. And then Liam hears something and Hayden hears something, and they notice that there's a car coming their way. And it's coming very slowly, and it sort of creeps up and it hits something. I'm not sure if it hit a tree or what exactly that was, but it's going to stop. They're going to notice the front windshield has been broken. Liam opens the door. He looks in. The passenger side door has been ripped off. And just in one of those little moments of almost like a jump scare, we see a young boy in the back seat of the car. I have to guess he was around 12 years old. Now, that's basically going to be the cold opening, and we're going to move into the actual episode, and we actually get to see that Scott and Stiles have tried to stop someone who was stealing helium, I guess it was. I'm still not totally sure if the person was actually stealing something or whether he was actually supposed to have it, but Scott had turned all alpha, had caused the van to stop, and Stiles was there as well. Sheriff Stilinski was there. The police were there, and they are basically talking about why Scott and Stiles did what they did. That's going to lead us to a scene basically where Scott and Stiles are going to be driving back towards apparently home, and they are talking, and they end up in a situation where they are sort of reminiscing about what's going on in Beacon Hills. They haven't had any big issues in months, and it feels good, but they feel like they don't have anything to do. They sort of feel useless, and you also have the fact that they're getting ready to head off to college, so they don't know what their role is anymore. And they're going to be discussing this, and this is when Stiles is going to get a phone call from his dad, and his dad basically tells them about the boy that was found. So Scott and Stiles head to the police station, and they're going to come in as Stilinski is talking to the boy, Alex, who again, he's probably about 12 or 13 years old. And he's telling Alex that he has a way to maybe figure out what happened. And of course, we can sort of figure out he's going to have Scott use that talent where you can like stick your claws in the back of somebody's neck and go into their memories. And that is what Scott is going to do. And he sort of sees what happens to him, and he sort of understands about the cowboy-looking people that took Alex's parents. As I remember, he sees one of the cowboys on a horse, which we know these are the Ghost Riders. I mean, that's a spoiler, but this is what this show is about, so I don't have any issues going ahead and saying that this early. But then Scott withdraws from his mind. They're going to discuss the situation a little bit, and the boy's going to be worried because he's just lost his parents. Now we're going to skip on to Beacon Hills High School, and the gang is getting together. You basically have a situation where Malia is trying to get pictures taken, and Stiles keeps interrupting them, and he's eventually going to go back and he's talking to Malia and some of the others. She actually mentions that, hey, he needs to have his pictures taken as well. Well, he pulls out his form that he would have had to have turned in, and it's completely blank, and Malia's sort of like, what's going on there? And Stiles says, well, I thought I had filled it out, and it's just sort of left there as another student, Sydney, comes up to take all their pictures together. So we get to see Stiles, Scott, Malia there together, and Sydney takes her picture. Now we're going to move on to another scene that's very interesting, and this is going to take place in the physics class. And in the physics class, we have another new teacher to Beacon Hills. Right off, that should tell you, hey, this guy is going to be a bad guy. But he's discussing physics, and he's discussing Schrodinger's cat. And the thing is, everybody is paying attention. The girls are paying attention because he's pretty good looking. The guys, Corey, Mason, we know they're together. They're paying a lot of attention because, again, he's a nice looking guy. And the guys like, let's say Liam, are jealous that their girlfriend, Hayden, is sort of making goo-goo eyes at him. And so with that, that's going to introduce us to our new physics teacher. And I'm sorry, but my mind has just gone blank on his name. I think it may have been Mr. Gallagher. And again, this is a spoiler, but again, if you're watching this, you probably know what's happening. He's going to end up being the big bad guy and the big bad sort of like Nazi werewolf that has caused all this to happen. Now, one of the things that's going to happen is you're also going to have a situation here where Mason and Corey are together with Liam and Hayden, and they start realizing their compasses don't work. The magnetic orientation is wrong. So Corey actually goes invisible and goes into the cabinet of the teacher, and he has a regular compass, and they start using it. And you're going to have a situation where Liam and Mason are going to follow that compass. Now, we also get to see Scott and Stiles try to make a run for it to go investigate. They want to go to Alex's house, but you actually have a situation where, well, they run into Lydia's mom, and she's not very happy. Most of that's with Scott because she actually helped him not get, I guess, kicked out of school because he'd missed like 39 class periods because of what he does. And, of course, he's with Stiles as well, and you start sort of getting the sense they're going to be stuck for a while. She sends them back to their last period, and they have to wait until 3:30 to go anywhere. Now, sort of keeping things simple here, there are a couple little things that happen during this time period as well. We do get to go back to the sheriff's station, and the sheriff comes in, and Alex is not in his office. After they do a search for him, they find Alex has locked himself in a jail cell in the back to try to protect himself. Stilinski wants to get him out, but he wants to stay back there. He is definitely scared, and Stilinski decides to allow him to do that. We also get to see Lydia is going to start having some of her, I'm just going to call them visions, where she's just sort of out of it. She's dreaming. She's sort of in another world at the time. And eventually Malia is going to figure that out, and they're going to try to figure out what's going on. Not a huge amount going on with that at that point in the story. Now, eventually Scott and Stiles do get out. They are going to head to the house and of Alex's. And once they come in, it's very spooky because the house looks like no one has lived there in years. And they go in multiple rooms. They go in bedrooms. They finally find a door that is locked. And when they open it up, it is apparently Alex's room. And it's completely as it should be. The bed is made. There's pictures on the wall. There's clothes around. It looks like someone is still living there. Well, they're eventually going to get in a situation where they're downstairs, or at least Scott is downstairs, and, for the Ghost Riders, they've sort of used this bristling sound of a breeze going through leaves to signal that they are coming. And you're going to have a situation at one point where Scott is downstairs. This sort of breeze happens, and he had just been looking at their their dinner table, and there were a couple settings for people, and I mean plates and bowls for people. Well, after that sound, the plates are gone, but you can see the dust outline of where the plates had been setting. Now, at about that same time, we go back to Stiles, who is in Alex's room, and he's looking under Alex's bed because he heard that Ghost Rider noise. That's what I'm going to call it. And he looks under the bed, and he sees horse feet on the opposite side of the bed. He's shocked. He stands up. He looks on the other side. There's nobody there. Okay. So he's going to meet back up with Scott. Scott's going to hear someone coming. They go around the corner, and there's Mason and Liam. They're eventually going to find their way back to Alex's room, and it is basically cleared out. There's nothing there. Now, a couple other things that I just want to mention before our group leaves the house is, first off, while Stiles was in Alex's room, he saw all of these pictures of Alex, and they all looked like they were missing something. And one of the pictures was one that had a frame of number 1 dad, but it only showed Alex, but it looked like he may have had his hand draped over somebody's shoulder, but his dad wasn't in it. So Stiles is going to start thinking about what was going on. He ends up leaving. He gets ready to leave, and that's when he actually comes face to face with one of the Ghost Riders. They actually shoot at him. They miss. They hit the door. Scott and the rest of the guys come upstairs. There are no holes in the wall, and that's actually when they open the door and they look in and they see that Alex's room has basically disappeared. Now, this is going to basically lead Stiles to believing that they make people disappear. They haven't quite yet come up with the idea of the Ghost Riders, but they're sort of getting an idea that this is what is happening. Now, Stiles is going to be talking to Lydia. They've actually returned basically to the school, and they're talking with each other about what they know. And then we're also going to see a scene between Hayden, Mason, and Liam talking about the future. And they're sort of joking about Liam being the alpha when Liam smells blood. They're going to go off in search for the blood, and then we're going to flash to Scott and Stiles walking out by the lacrosse field. They're actually coming through the tunnel there back to the high school, and one of the lacrosse players is going to run by. Stiles says something to him about where he got that jersey because the jersey was Stiles' number, and the player just says that coach gave it to him. Scott and Stiles are going to continue to talk, and then we're going to skip on to Lydia again, and she's again sort of going through one of her little episodes, and then we're going to get another scene with Liam, Hayden, and Mason still trying to find the blood. They decide that it's in the air system, so they're going to head to the power plant area. Then we finally do get to see Alex get taken. Basically, the Ghost Riders magically come through the ceiling of the police station and take him away. After their meeting out by the lacrosse field, Scott and Stiles are going to head into the building. They're going to separate from each other. They actually have this moment where Stiles wants to tell Scott something, but he sort of hesitates, and Scott tells him, hey, tell me later, and they separate and go their ways. We get to see Malia and Lydia back in a classroom, and they are basically reading about the Ghost Riders and the Riders on the Night, and that if you see them, you're the next one to get taken. Now, up to this point, you had a situation where Scott was of the belief that it was going to be Liam and Hayden that were going to be taken because they were there on the road that night. But it's going to become quickly evident that that's not the case, and that's very important for Lydia to know because she knows Stiles has actually already by this point told her what he saw in the house, and she's going to figure out that he was the last one to see anything of the Ghost Riders. So we get to go back to the school. Stiles, who has entered the school, he is going to talk to Lydia's mom, who most certainly does not know who he is. Of course, the sheriff's department is there because Liam and Mason and Hayden found the dead body, and they are going to continue on. Stiles comes up and meets up with Liam and Mason and Hayden, and they think he's a student from another class. And so at this point, Stiles has sort of figured out what's going on, but he's going to end up running into his dad. And his dad actually calls him son, but in that way that just an older guy talks down to a younger male. And Stiles had thought that he still remembered him. And actually, you also had a scene right before that where Stiles had talked to Scott on the phone, and Scott wanted to know who he was talking to. Now, Lydia, who has realized what is going on, she races off to find Stiles, and she's going to end up running into him as he comes out of the school. Of course, he's really upset. Nobody remembers him. He's very happy that Lydia remembers who he is, but he's going to, after they talk, figure out that he's going to get taken. And you start seeing the horsemen surround him. They try to run away. They eventually end up in Stiles' Jeep, and that's going to be sort of the important part of this episode because Stiles knows he's going to get taken. He actually tried to start the Jeep or got ready to start the Jeep and decided not to. He knew he wasn't going to be able to run, so he actually uses his last few minutes to sort of express his feelings for Lydia and tell her to do anything she could to remember him and to remember them falling in love and to remember some of the things they had done and the dance and different things like that. And then she says she will, and one of the Ghost Riders pulls him out of the Jeep and they are gone. Well, basically speaking, the episode's going to end as we see Lydia come into the school, and she has one of those looks on her face like she has forgotten something. She's looking around. She's seeing all her friends. She sees Scott come into the area. This is apparently the next morning. She sees Scott, she sees some of the others, and she walks up and they all talk, and she basically says, seem like I've got something. It seems like there's something I should remember. And she's left sort of in one of those states of being upset and not really knowing why she's upset. And that's how the episode actually ends. Now, I do want to take just a couple minutes here to go over a few of the ideas I have about this episode, some of the thoughts and some of my reactions, and a little bit of why I chose this in my top 10. I know it's not an episode that's in most people's top 10s, but first off, I'm just going to start out. I would say probably the number one reason why this is in my top 10 and in at number 9 is the importance of the episode, in that it is the episode that basically where Stiles was taken away. And this was huge for this season, and we all know that part of this was because of his shooting, of Dylan O'Brien's shooting schedule with them. He had prior conflicts and wasn't able to shoot the entire season, so they sort of wrote this in. I thought they did a very good job of writing it in, but the other important thing about it was it sort of shows what this show was like without Stiles, okay? And I think from the very beginning, this show was very much Scott and Stiles. And although Scott is the main character, you also had to have Stiles there as well. And I think the whole season was sort of missing something without Stiles. In the episodes, he wasn't there. Of course, he did return later on, thankfully. But with that, it really showed Stiles' importance to the entire story for Teen Wolf. And I thought that was very important. And I liked how they did it. I thought it was the correct option that Lydia is the last one that remembered him, even past Scott and even past his dad. And so with that, of course, she's going to eventually remember him, and that's going to allow them to move the storyline along. But it was sort of sad, them saying saying goodbye to each other and just having that whole interaction in the Jeep was something that I really enjoyed that from this episode. Now, some other things just to put in there as well. I really like what was written in this episode about Scott and Stiles, especially trying to figure out their place, and then the rest of the pack, Hayden, Liam, Mason, trying to figure out where they stood in the pack and what was going to happen once Stiles and Scott left. And one of the reasons I really love this show was because it took different paths to show what teenagers go through. And at some point, you get to that place in your life where you have to make that decision, where that is something you have to consider. There's a road, and you have to choose which way to go. You've got to see what is the next step. And I thought they did a very good job of putting that into this show. Now, I also like the whole idea of the ghostwriters and what they represented. Sort of that whole spooky mystery is something that I actually do like about Teen Wolf. I'm not into full-blown horror, and they got a little close to that in a couple of seasons and a few episodes, and those are not my most favorite episodes. But when they kept it to this just being very spooky, I really enjoyed Teen Wolf for that. And so that's, again, one of the reasons why I would put this up there in the top 10. Now, those are just a few reasons that I really like this episode. I would love to hear what everybody thinks. I know out of my top 10, this is probably the one people are going to say, you really thought that was a top 10 episode? But I really enjoyed this episode. It didn't have any negatives for me. I thought it was pretty well written. The pacing was excellent, and the music was always very good for Teen Wolf. And so with that, yes, I would rank this number 9 in my list of Teen Wolf's top 10 episodes. With that, I hope you enjoyed this review. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below. And I'll see you next time on the Fandom Realm.